society embraces combat veterans. I know that society wants to make things easier for combat veterans. So if somebody applies for a job and they're coming back from military service and they were in combat, they're more than likely to get that job than me or you, people who weren't in the military or weren't in combat. But every time I've worked with a military veteran, a combat veteran, everything was terrible. I'm going to get back to that. But everybody that I've worked with who was in the military, who had combat experience, all 5 murdered people. Check this out. I'm about to set the tone of this video.
Came home shattered, physically and emotionally. He'd been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. John's brother, Mike.
When people ask me how John was, it was kind of like, I don't know. I don't know how John is, because John's not here anymore. It's somebody else.
2 months after being medically discharged from the Army, John did the unthinkable. Orange County prosecutor Steve McGravy.
Jackie was beaten to death. It was a bloody scene. The pictures show a scene that, most people would think it's a Quentin Tarantino movie.
26-year-old John Needham beat Jackie to death with his bare hands.
And his girlfriend was a beautiful black girl. That doesn't have anything to do with the story. I'm not making this a racial thing. I'm just pointing out that this white guy, he was a handsome white guy, right? Looked like an action movie hero, and he was dating a beautiful black woman. All right, now I want to speak about this situation right here. Affidavit: Fort Hood soldier was bludgeoned to death, dismembered, and burned. Okay, I don't know if I can find video footage of this. All right, so this guy, Aaron David Robinson, he was a young kid. I think he had just signed up for the military. Young black boy, just signed up for the military. He was brand new to the military, and he actually had a position of seniority over other new recruits, right? And basically what he did was he killed this girl named Vanessa, and he cut her body up. He dismembered her right in the military fort. And it was sad. It was sad, and it was terrible. And the reason why I'm bringing up these 2 particular incidents because it shines a light on a larger issue, and that larger issue is just the level of violence that happens with our veterans and combat veterans. And look, don't get me wrong. My grandfather fought in World War II. My uncles fought in the Vietnam War. I love veterans. I appreciate their service. I'm not anti-military. I'm not anti-government or anything like that. I actually appreciate the service that our military people put in. The military in the United States is a small group of people. It's only 1 million people in our military, okay? It's basically more people in prison and jail than we have in our military. So we have a pretty small, we have a huge military if you want to make a comparison on global terms, in terms of the other countries of the world. It's huge. 1 million people is huge in comparison. But in comparison to America, which has 360 million citizens, 1 million people is not a lot. It's a small particular group. So if you have a small group of people, you're not really getting diverse representation in that particular group. The group is so small that it tends to be its own culture. It tends to have its own identity. And I think that's the reason why we see so many stories about military veterans, combat veterans committing acts of violence. It got so bad that Fort Hood actually did a press conference and told the press this: we don't know why our soldiers are being discharged and killing people. We're investigating it. They actually did that. It got that bad. So many people were coming from Fort Hood into society and killing people. Not just like random acts of violence, but just getting upset with their girlfriend, their boyfriend, whatever. Now, let me tell you about my personal experiences, okay? I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm going to go through one, okay? I had this guy. I worked at a hotel with this particular guy. He was a military veteran. He was a black dude. He was cool. At the time, I was like 23. He was like 25. He was a skateboarder, and he was one of those black dudes that was just real diverse in his personality, you know what I mean? He had a lot of different hobbies, a lot of different interests. He was cool. He was open-minded. He was cool. And I could relate to him because back then I liked skateboarding too, you know what I mean? So, all right. I noticed that he had some odd habits inside of our job. Whenever an Asian person would come into our job, or Arabic person, or Iranian person, or anybody that lived on the Asian continent, pretty much. And the Asian continent, Western Asia, that's what they call the Middle East, okay? So that's Afghanistan, Iraq, all of that stuff, right? And then you have the other parts of Asia, right? And whenever he would see an Asian person, he would come to me and say, man, watch her, watch him. They're up to something. And I thought it was funny at first, but then he actually told me that he was paranoid about them because he said in his military experience, it taught him to be skeptical of Asian people, all Asian people. He told me that Asian people had some type of secret plot to take over the world or whatever, and he was always suspicious of them. We just so happened to have a Korean manager, and he always, created arguments with her. He would go out of his way to start arguments with her. For example, if he came in 5 minutes late and she said something, he would blow up, cuss her out, stuff like that. Long story short, one day he gets into an argument with our Asian manager, right? And he pulls out a knife. Pulls out a knife on her. He gets removed by security, right? And what happens next is we don't hear from him for a while. Eventually we forget about them. You know how it is. People come and go in your life, especially people that you work with. I'm the kind of person, I don't really hang out with people that I work with. I don't let them in my personal space, but I do respect them on the job, and I interact with them on the job, but I keep it compartmentalized. All right, so eventually I'm watching the news one day, and I see that this guy killed his girlfriend's father. And I'm watching the news, and it's like, hey, this guy killed his girlfriend's father. And I remember he used to tell me that he wasn't from Virginia, which is where I live. He's from some other state. He came here because he met his girlfriend at a college here. He came to Virginia for college, but eventually he dropped out. He didn't finish, but he met a girl. So he moved in with this girl who lived with her father. She was attending this college. She was living with her father. She had graduated, whatever, you know what I mean? And he's living with them. And he would always tell me about conflicts and arguments that they had. The biggest one was he was junky. The father didn't like the fact that he would take a shower and just leave the wet towel on the floor instead of putting it up, folding it up, and putting it on a rack. He would brush his teeth and leave toothpaste inside the sink bowl. Stuff like that would make the father upset, right? And he used to tell me about this stuff, and I would say, hey, those aren't unreasonable demands. That's actually pretty reasonable. I would, if I had a guest in my house, I would want them to tighten up on those things as well. And he told me that he just basically had this mindset where he thought that was just the most unreasonable thing in the world for somebody to expect him to pick up their wet towel after they've taken a shower. He thought it was just so not a big deal that he took a shower, dried off, and just left the wet towel on the floor. So if after 3 or 4 days he's got 3 or 4 different towels that he hasn't folded up, and they're wet and they're starting to mold and stink, so he killed him. He stabbed him to death. And then it happened 4 more times. 4 more people came to my job. They worked in the same department as me, all combat veterans. And they did the same thing. They would stay there for a while, and then eventually they would disappear, and I would watch the news one day and see that they got themselves caught up in some murder. And now I'm not saying that our veterans are all bad. I support veterans, but what I'm saying is most people, if you ask them how many people are in the United States military, they'll probably think, shoot, about 50 million. No, it's only 1 million. Google it. So if you got 1 million people, we got 360 million people in the country. That the military is not really a diverse group. It's a small, tiny portion of a group. It's a segment of a group, so it's really not representative of the entire country. So I'm thinking that the military attracts a certain type of personality, a certain type of mindset. Everybody's not like that. But out of 1 million people, if you've got, what did they say? The statistics is, let's look up how many veterans commit suicide per day, right? Right? How many vets commit? I'm typing with one hand, so excuse me. All right, 22 per day. 1 every 65 minutes. All right, so if you got 22 veterans committing suicide per day, and we've only got 1 million people in the military. I mean, I'm just saying, out of that 1 million, even if you got 100,000, right? 100,000 people that are prone to violence, that's 10%, right? Right? So, I don't know. With salute to our troops, I'm just, giving you guys some of my life experience. Peace. To the gods and earths. Oh.